Okay, if I've done this correctly, then you should be able to hear me, and I should get some people coming in here in the next couple seconds, and we'll begin reading the news. Today's is coming hot off the press, so I'm bringing it to you live, so you're going to get my reactions the same time I read it, and at the end, we'll go to the phones with you guys to find out what you think about patch 4.2's notes. So we're going to wait a couple seconds right here to see if people show up and everyone can hear me, and then if it works, we'll go ahead and start going. All right, so if you're out there, do please comment in the side, make sure you can hear me, and we'll start reading the news as soon as people are there. Hi there. Yo, can people hear me all right? Can hear me. Good. All right, folks. Today's news is patch 4.2, and it is coming hot off the presses. I have not read this yet. You're going to get my reactions and the news at the same time, and at the end, we're going to go back to you guys for commentary and your thoughts about whether or not this is the patch you were looking for. So I'm going to read this news live and use my news anchor voice while doing it. So, patch 4.2, Shadows of Change, Content Additions. Hi everyone, I'm Rich Aldridge, Game Director of Total War Warhammer. Today I want to share some news with you on the new content that will be arriving soon for Shadows of Change with patch 4.2, free for existing users, and bolstering the DLC for anyone picking it up post patch 4.2. I'll be covering what you can expect going forward from the Total War Warhammer series, taking a peek behind the curtain as to how we go about planning, creating, and making our DLCs, and having a close look at the new additions Grand Cathay will be receiving as part of patch 4.2. Which is why I assume this is part 1. There'll be 2 more parts after this. Reflecting on Shadows of Change. I'll cut straight to it. We didn't give you enough new characters and units to play with at the original release of Shadows of Change. If you'd like my thoughts on that, I'll link my video that I posted previously, and I will admit I'm very curious to see how their additions line up with a lot of the fan expectations you guys have set. We believe we can put this right for you, having listened to your feedback these past months to provide you with better and more varied options for your armies. We know that you, our community, are as passionate about the game as we are, and we're pleased to say that many of your suggestions are being enacted upon. Not all ideas and requests are possible, though. The era of Karl Franz is, as you come to expect, a rich and exciting setting for Total War, and we work closely with the Warhammer Studio to ensure that the content of this era of Warhammer is as faithfully represented in our game as possible. Likely they're referring to the recent release of Old World here and Age of Sigmar. All the forces featured within Shadows of Change DLC can look forward to a sizable collection of reinforcements, but we won't be adding Hag Mothers as generic lords, as Mother Ostankaya is the only Hag Mother of Kislev. Similarly, relationship between the Gospodars and Ungls is taking a backseat as we look less at the tensions of historic Kislevite culture and more at what defines Kislev as a unified military force in the era of Karl Franz. Not necessarily surprising. A lot of what we're seeing right now is a new rewrite of the Kislev lore, so them not going back to this older stuff, sort of makes a deal of sense. Disappointing, but I am curious what they'll do with Kislev if that's not the case, because that was a good deal of their previous lore. Similarly, we won't be adding beaks to Zangors. As while this avian characteristic occurs in other Warhammer settings, these elite Gors in the old world represent those beastmen who have drawn the eye of the Changer of Ways, rather than a totally separate offshoot breed. But as ever, we aim to ensure that whatever we add to Total War Warhammer 3 is as authentic an experience as the world of Warhammer as possible. That's weird, because there's actually a note in the game you can see where it talks about their beaks in one of the actual unit descriptions, which they removed. So, odd choice. Don't know why. I would love to find out the reasoning behind that one day. What to expect moving forward. Looking to the future, the team... Looking to the future, the team and I love the Warhammer universe and want to make as much content for it as possible, whether that would be to add further exciting characters like the Golden Knight, for Kislev, spectacular units and creatures. Yes, I'm looking at you, the mighty Hot Pot. Of course, throwing out some halflings love right there, or other unexplored lore. We still plan to make many more DLCs for Total War Warhammer 3, with some of them, like Thrones of Decay, following the same premise and composition as Shadows of Change, where we will add to and develop 3 existing races from across the Warhammer world. Accompanied by our patches and updates, this will give us the opportunity to go back to some of your most beloved races and give them some attention. Below, I have laid out what you can expect to see for Shadows of Change and Thrones of Decay in terms of content and features for these products moving forward. Drumroll, please. DLC content, Shadows of Change and Thrones of Decay. From now on, we'll have 3 Legendary Lords, each playable in the Realms of Chaos and Immortal Empires campaigns. Unique gameplay mechanics for each Legendary Lord. 3 Legendary Heroes, 1 per race. 3 Lords, 1 per race. 3 Heroes, 1 per race. And finally, at least, well, just says 5 units, either infantry, cavalry, monsters, etc. per race, 3 regiments of renown per race, and 1 free LC character. A Cold Hellbrass was that for Shadows of Change, and there will be a Legendary Lord for Thrones of Decay. Well, that's all wins. So it's interesting because, at least in my video, that's pretty much exactly what I laid out, and it's coming back. I love to see that the Legendary Lords are making a return. I very much enjoy those campaigns. I think it brings a lot more to the table than Legendary Hero does as far as replayability and content, so let's hope they stick to it, because that's definitely the expectations of the community, and that's why we laid them out that way. Potential further content, new spell lores, new mounts, new additional free LC. I wonder what that could be. That's a very broad thing. It's also interesting, new mounts are possibilities. So I guess mount types, so things like the Toad Dragon and stuff like that, which I assume would go into the units and heroes and lords. They're just going to break it down that far. Whatever. This is still a win. All right. So, they have an asterisk next to all of them, I just noticed right here. Subject to the IP, theming of the DLC, and where available, or applicable. Caveats, boys. All right, comparison chart. So here's what they had previously. Here's what they're going to have now. So you'll see you're getting 2 additional Legendary Heroes added in, 2 additional Lords, 2 additional Heroes, 6 new units. Regiments, Renowns remain the same. Magical Lores got added, and a free LC, which just goes to show you how much didn't make it into Shadows of Change. So, hey, they're going back, though. Let's see what it looks like. Thank you again for your invaluable feedback since the release of Shadows of Change, and in particular, the thoughts on improving the rosters and having parity across the races. Equality, making sure they're equal. Parity is a tough word for some people. With the content we are adding as part of them. As mentioned above, each race will now have a Legendary Lord, Legendary Hero, Lord Hero, 5 units, and 3 regiments of renown. This, we hope, will allow you to lead thematic armies that are better connected to the Legendary Lords in DLC, add both lower tier troops and big centerpiece monsters, and start to fill some of the gaps and needs of the races in the game that you have asked for. Where possible, with further content, air quotes, we will also be adding thematic lores of magic, mounts for new and existing characters, and make use of and making some much requested free LC where it makes sense. Catherine's sled. Putting her on a horse and a bear. Oh, man. And it's funny because what they're responding to here, what they're saying with Catherine's sled, there's a very thematic look for the Ice Princess where she has a sled. That's what she was known for. And you can actually find a lot of this available on the Mod Workshop. What we haven't heard so far is the keywords Chicken Hut. So I will be curious if Chicken Hut gets mentioned at some point. I hope that everything I've mentioned above looks much more in line with your expectations for the DLC as we move to significantly bridge the gap of our past products like Chaos Dwarfs and what we will offer moving forwards, starting with Shadows of Change. Now on to the exciting stuff you've all come to see. Grand Cathay additions. To set the scene, when we went back to look at what we could add to enrich the offering of Grand Cathay and Shadows of Change, we focused heavily on the theme that surrounds the Jade Dragon, his celestial court. Having his eyes and ears everywhere, having the ability to quickly react and protect his empire, to be the emperor in all intents and purposes. This meant plenty of conversations with Games Workshop in looking to find characters and units that best complemented this approach and made sense from a lore perspective. Looking into what we hadn't included previously in Total War Warhammer 3 or Shadows of Change quickly helped us fill in some of the gaps in Grand Cathay's roster, such as with the Gate Master and Celestial Lion. The Lion in particular was something that almost made the cut for the original release of Shadows of Change, so I'm excited to see how in the new roster as both a monstrous unit and as a mount option. But it also got us to look a little further afield too, and you'll see our first ever legendary hero for Grand Cathay, Saytang the Watcher. Okay. And by the way, when they're talking about Grand Cathay stuff here, know that Grand Cathay has been confirmed for for Warhammer the Old World at some point releasing forward. So they are drawing from existing Games Workshop lore and IPs. So this is where they're pulling a lot of this information from. And you can expect to see tabletop models at some point in the future. Saytang the Watcher. Saytang? Saytang. One of those is probably right. Sentinel of the Heavens, legendary hero. So let me introduce Grand Cathay's first colossal legendary hero to you. We wanted to add Saytang to move away from what is currently known about Grand Cathay and showcase some of the other inhabitants of this mighty empire. Saytang represents an ever-watching protective figure, not dissimilar to Yun Bo, but as you will see, a fair bit larger. Saytang gives the opportunity to expand on Grand Cathay's use of magical constructs, something which is core to this great nation and how it protects itself. It's also core to Tomb Kings, along with giving them devastating, long-ranged artillery-like potential. Saytang also lends themselves nicely to the connection of the Jade Dragon has to the winds of Azir, the heavens, and the more magical elements of Grand Cathay. Ooh, new lore is told by Game Workshop. Let's see their little blurb right here, shall we? Known as the Guardians of the Sky, the Heavenly Bowmen, or commonly to the people of the southern provinces simply the Watcher. Saytang is the great sentinel that stands atop the mountains of heaven, towering over other sentinels. Saytang is an imposing sight with its outstretched wings and great stone-feathered helm. Those who have witnessed Saytang in battle claim no armor or barrier can turn aside the arrows it fires from its great wind bow, the shafts piercing the ranks of enemies and even the iron hides of fell beasts. And though Saytang cannot fly in the true sense, its power allows it to leap great distances, even jumping from mountain peak to mountain peak in the defense of the Empire. I'm sure he can also go over tall buildings faster than a speeding bullet as well. Saytang the Sentinel. Above you can see the first step we take when designing and adding content to our DLCs. This is concept art. Starting with a thumbnail image, which gives us a quick and flexible method to work with Games Workshop. And first realizing the character, it's our job to get the scale, flavor, functionality, and work required to bring this model to life, but be easily adaptable to suit the needs of our IP and game when we move on to the next stage, the concept art. So this is actually interesting stuff for me. I do a lot of the design aspects, and there's a really great video that was a sort of game TED Talk a couple years ago from the creators of Warhammer 2, and they talk about when you look at a unit, you can actually see the design philosophy behind it. They have what they call 3 different steps, primary, secondary, tertiary aspects. So what's the silhouette, right? So in this case, the silhouette is got the wings onto it, right? And then they add secondary elements to start making it look more interesting. So you can see a little bit of filigree, the larger things like this that help to kind of break it up and make it more interesting and sort of draw the eye. And finally, tertiary. So like little tiny bits of filigree, a little bit of glowing parts, things like that. So it's always a 1, 2, 3-step process. Excellent talk if you want to learn about how they design the things, because their actual designers gave the whole talk right there. But this obviously is in that same vein where eyes are drawn to the center, then you got the wingy bits, then you got the glowing bits. Primary, secondary, tertiary. All right. When entering the concept stage of the creation process, we are looking up to the visual quality of the model from the thumbnail, adding details, looking at materials and textures to use. This will act as a comprehensive blueprint to guide our 3D character artists in the creation of the final model for you to play with. We'll also use this as a sounding board for how our animations and designs will work, tweaking the size and scale of the body parts to work inside the game's engine, creating proxy models to test things, and maximize the fun of each character we create. And you can see a non-textured version of it inside right there. It's very rare you see in-progress images in these games, so it's very cool they're sharing that. So now you know a little bit of the process about how we created our characters. Let's discuss what Saytang is doing good at doing in the game. Gameplay overview. Saytang the Watcher is a giant-sized legendary hero which, disregarding mounted characters, is a rare sight in Total War Warhammer 3. Much like the Bone Giant or the Tomb Kings, Saytang uses a giant magical bow to fire artillery-grade projectiles into the enemy lines. Saytang is also relatively strong in close combat, with good defensive stats and the ability to buff other nearby constructs. Saytang doesn't fly, being a construct, even with those mighty wings, but can jump large distances to close the gap on the enemy. These are going to be the main traits. Construct. With the introduction of Saytang into the game, we have reevaluated the role of constructs on the Cathay roster. The Terracotta Sentinel and both Guardian Lions are now considered constructs, with the same rules as the constructs found on Tomb King's roster. This makes sense. Saytang has an ability that synergizes with this type of unit. Tough and heavy. Saytang has a high amount of armor, which enables it to shrug off most attacks from non-armor piercing sources. As a heavier character, Saytang will be able to send smaller entities flying with ease. This goes to unit mass, which is a stat that has been used, but sometimes it's forgotten about. Basically, if a large, heavy unit collides with another unit with low mass, it then shoots them out backwards. That's where you get a lot of weird interactions inside of gameplay where people just like launch into space. But that's the mass thing is where that's coming into play right there. It also makes it so that if you click through a unit on the opposite side, they'll push less mass units out of the way and keep moving there. Giant bow. Armed with the wind bow, Saytang can deliver long-range attacks and singular targeted shots with devastating precision. Okay, I'm going to pause for 2 seconds because in the back of my head, there is a great deal of Hindu mythology and Buddhist mythology that I think has a winged warrior, wind god, archer guy, and I cannot remember the name off the top of my head. So if anyone knows that, do please put it in the comments on the side, because this is definitely drawing on mythology from the area, and obviously bringing it back into Grand Cathay, especially the wind protector spirit thing. There's in the back of my head, there's something there. I'll have to look it up. Gate Master of the Celestial Cities. Hero. You may have seen the art of this character since the release of Total War Warhammer 3, a character which didn't quite make the final cut, but he is now here to stand tall and add a bit of melee strength to the Grand Cathay front line. Jade Warriors are the professional soldiers of Grand Cathay, and the Gate Master of the Celestial Cities are their leaders. To earn the title of Gate Master, a Jade Warrior must have served in the defense of their city and many a veteran of the Empire's many wars. Like their soldiers, a Gate Master is trained in defensive warfare and how best to defend their city, and as such, know how to read the lay of the land before a battle. This can prove useful in enacting the will of the Lord Magistrate, who trusts their Gate Master above all other officers in their army. And you can see the original concept art right there. I mean, they pretty much a one-to-one recreation, which is awesome. Gameplay overview. The Gate Master is a defensive line-holding hero with hybrid weaponry. Using abilities, he can buff the defenses of nearby troops while shooting enemies with his crossbow from behind the main battle line. A fun fact is that the Gate Master hero is the first hero with a conventional crossbow that we have put into the game, Dark Elf repeaters notwithstanding, which will serve the armies of Cathay well in many different scenarios. Is that true, though? Because dwarfs, there's a dwarf unit, the Dwarf Ranger unit has a crossbow, doesn't it? Right, it was one of the ones, like the first, like the whatever in the Warlord DLC. Is one of the guys right there. I think it's the Dwarf Rangers had crossbows, I believe. So, we'll check on that one. Hybrid Combatant. The Gate Master uses a combination of sword, shield, and crossbow, making him a very adaptable unit in all forms of combat. Defensive. The Gate Master excels at defensive warfare with several abilities that buff friendly battle lines. Mounted. When mounted on a warhorse, the Gate Master can quickly move between the battle lines to where he is needed most. Generally, all-purpose hero makes sense, unlike the specialist of the Dragon guy, which was heavy damage, or the really fat Magistrates, which are just totally buffing. This one's sort of like your general utility, just hero, good for all fights. And can only be mounted on a warhorse, so that's the limitation there. They're never going to get too powerful. Great Moonbird. Monster and monstrous mount. Oh, that looks cool. Continuing the theme of the Celestial Court and to give Grand Cathay some added flying power, we have added the Great Moonbird as both a monstrous single-entity flying unit and as a mount option for a variety of characters to field. Favored of the Empress, the Great Moonbirds are found in the highest peaks of the mountains of heaven, and they are said to make their nests in the craters of Mons Schleb, the silver moon of the Warhammer world, and only fly down to Earth when called by either the Empress or the most powerful astromancers. Fearsome to behold in battle, the Moonbird are often wreathed in silvery flames, or moonfire, which burns the enemies of the Empire who come into contact with it. Powerful lords, especially wizards of the Celestial Court, might even be granted a Moonbird as a mount, though this is only for a short time before the creature once more returns to the heavens. It's interesting, it's sort of like a phoenix. It's probably actually based on the phoenix in the game, now that I say that aloud. Yep, it is. I recognize that pose. That's the Phoenix pose from the High Elves. So, alteration of the Phoenix, same sort of idea, themed to Grand Cathay. Still, though, pretty cool and awesome that it can be a mount. That looks really cool. And you can see that primary, secondary, tertiary colors. So, primary blue, secondary with the red to draw eye detail, and then, the mount on the side. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. All right. Gameplay overview. Similar to the High Elf Phoenixes, speaking of which, the Great Moonbird is a magical flying monster with flaming attacks and a powerful AoE vortex ability. Grand, so new strategies will become viable in battle, whether it is providing air-to-air defense for sky junks or striping deep into enemy lines. The Great Moonbird is also a mount for the Astromancer, which offers them a whole new level of battlefield mobility. Airborne, the Great Moonbird can fly and traverse otherwise impassable terrain. Moonfire, by flapping its wings, the Great Moonbird can produce a vortex of moonfire, which damages all enemies caught within its radius. And flaming and magical. Much like the Arcane Phoenix of the High Elves, the Great Moonbird can deal both flaming and magical attacks, and obviously still being a mount for the Astromancer, making Astromancers a bit more interesting. Celestial Lion. Oh, that looks cool. Sorry, I gotta peek. I haven't seen this yet, so I want to peek down a little bit. That looks cool. Huh. Okay, all right. Probably my favorite model of the new additions to Grand Cathay is the Celestial Lion's beauty and strength is second to none, acting as both a single-entity monstrous flying unit and a mount option for a variety of characters from Grand Cathay. The Celestial Lion will strike terror into those that stand within its way. Quote from Games Workshop. Winged lions exist in the East, I believe to have descended from natural beasts warped by the coming of chaos in the world. Unlike the fell manticores of the West, these celestial beasts have been purified by the power of the Dragon Emperor and live within the sacred hunting grounds of the forests of the moon. Haven't heard that one before. Interesting lore bit. Favored sorcerers or warriors may be gifted such a creature by the dragons, riding into battle and striking fear into the foes of the Empire. That just looks cool. I just think it looks cool. I like the color detail on that. I like that it really pops. I like that it's not bland. I like there's some really cool stuff going on. So who gets that? I think they're going to tell us here in a second. But yeah, I like the detailing on the colors and all that. The Celestial Lion is another flying single-entity monster for the armies of Cathay to utilize, similarly to a Griffin or a Manticore, but is able to provide air support on a budget compared to higher tier units like the Greater Moonbird. Okay. The Celestial General can also make use of this beast as a mount. Okay, so it's giving a new mount for the Celestial General, who is a little bit... He's going to get overshadowed by the Gatekeeper now, I have to guess. So they want to make sure it's very clear he is damage-oriented. Fly in on a friggin' flying lion. That tells you all you need to know about the guy. He's fast. Celestial Lion has exceptional ground mobility, make it perfect for harassing. He's airborne. He flies, and he's fearsome. Fearsome roar ability and the terror attribute, Celestial Lion can strike fear into the hearts of enemies. Again, trying to go in, hit the sides, hit people, and really mess up those lines. All right, last notes right here. Before I end today, I wanted to cover an omission that you may have been hoping for in Grand Cathay's roster update, an elite core infantry unit. There's a very good reason for this, and trust me, we aren't monkeying about. The first, as we explained, is on keeping the focus on the Celestial Court and the Jade Dragon. The second being that the Celestial Courts don't have a unit of this type to add, and that said, we've only just scratched the surface of the possible content we can create for Grand Cathay, and as I mentioned earlier, we have plans to support the game with lots of new content for the foreseeable future. So, when can you expect patch 4.2 and all of its additions to SOC? Well, the team are still working flat out to have everything ready for release, but we want to be upfront with you. There is a chance that our intended date could shift slightly. This is the true nature of video game development, and spotting those last-minute issues or adding that final polish, which can lead to release date changing. It's important to all of us here to get patch 4.2 right for you, so we don't want to rush it out before it's ready. And as it stands, we're on track to release in the middle of this month. But like I said, this could shift closer to the end of February, depending on how the remaining work goes. I'm optimistic, and the team are super energized in getting everything done and ready to put in your hands. Next week, I'll drop back on a deep dive on the additional units coming for Tzeentch, along with confirmation of 4.2's release date. Thanks for taking the time to read this. Chat with you all next week. I'll admit to you, when I read, we don't know when this is coming, I thought we were about to see like the word March or something pop up there. So either next week or 2 weeks from now. 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks from now is basically immaterial. So good on them. The point is they're pretty close to release. Cool. Okay. So I'll start off with my 2 cents, and then I'll turn it over to you guys. I'll take some questions, and basically go to the phone lines, as they say back in talk radio shows. Generally, it's everything I asked for. I think that if you go back, I didn't really know what unit specifically. I talked much more about Crowman units and things like that, which we obviously got more avian units in here, which got brought in. New mounts for lords. You know, the gate hero is sort of a gimme. It's funny because that's such a standard. I've been playing with that mod for months now. So seeing him here is sort of like, oh, I already had that at home. But I guess this is the official version, so that's good. You know, the official support is always nice because it doesn't break later. But the big win for me, like I said, is this right here. You know, the actual specific outline that I put up in letters. Hey, this is what everyone's looking for. And clearly someone saw that. So that's good. Many of us repeated the same thing. So that's cool. Awesome. Overall, excited. Not sure about the legendary hero. I don't know. We'll see how he plays. Sentinels have never been my thing, but they're pretty cool. And I think a giant flying guy with a giant glowing bow could be pretty interesting to mess around with. But they're definitely leading into that really heavy elite and really, like, for lack of a better, really magical units in here. So we'll be curious how that goes. All right. And let's see what you guys think. Fleshes out Cathay nicely. Reserve final judgment for when they're revealed. Right. Yeah. A lot of people haven't purchased Shadows of Change, as someone else is saying right there, and I would encourage you not to. Until all this stuff is revealed and it's all come out and people have actually seen it and played it and say that it works, yeah, I wouldn't touch it. I mean, and that's just being honest about it. It's definitely one of those that this is cool, but it's still words and promises until you actually see something and put it in your hands. Don't pay if you haven't already. Monkeying around. Yeah, the Monkey King thing, as I said previously, the lack of Monkey King in this game so far, for as obvious a seller as he is somewhat surprising to me. So, you know, the choice of going with Jade Dragon first, somebody made that. I don't know why, but it was never quite the one people were like, oh yeah. It was like they had to release a short story just to get context on who the guy was because he was a complete unknown before this. One Lore of Having, really hoping it's Lore of Hags. I agree. I think that Lore of Hags is probably the most likely of the three because Lore of Zinch is already in the game. Cathay didn't get any new casters, so it would be Lore of Hags, which they said that right up here for anyone seeing that where I say new magical lores +1. It would make sense to sort of bring it in right there because it's definitely lacking and needed. All right, and Lion Mount to be available to Celestial Generals. Is that already in the game? I haven't played in a few months. No, this would be a new unit coming in as the Lion Mount thing, and so once it's in, it'll be a unit and a mount option for Celestial Generals, which don't have it currently in game. Mount we're getting for the price. Want to see Lore of Hags? Man, I really am wondering if they're gonna do Chicken Hut. Like, it's one of those things, it's such a specific, like, request, but it's so cool, and it's a really easy thing to point to and be like, hey, isn't this neat? But we'll see. Does Cathay have a superior roster to the Empire now? I've always felt they sort of have. I mean, I like the flavoring of the Empire better, but I feel like Cathay sort of always beat them a little bit as far as, like, getting the new tools. There's a definite problem with feature creep across all three games, where the newer factions get newer, better abilities, they get more toggling stuff. And it is a constant fight for the balancing team, I can only imagine, to keep this stuff balanced in a way that feels fair. And especially, but I mean, there's a reason there's not a more prominent multiplayer scene, I'll put it that way, is that kind of stuff. There's just so many things to have to deal with right there. You know, StarCraft 2, it's 3 races, and they've been balancing it for 20 years, and they still can't quite get it quite right. So, I mean, imagine the hundreds of units that have to be balanced out here. It's wild. I don't foresee them doing a Monkey King theme for a while. It's a big seller. Yeah, they just did Cathay. I would like to see them do something else, but they seem to be really leaning into the fact that they always want Warhammer 3 DLC to have a Warhammer 3 Lord in it somewhere, because they keep referring to Realms of Chaos. I don't know why, but they do. So I would expect to see, you know, if it's 1, 2, 3 and then back around again, it's pretty quick. That'd be like the end of the year, early next year, we'd see Monkey King. Listen to complaints, still a lot of stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of, everyone's seeing that generally positive reception so far. Is it worth 25? Well, that's still up entirely to you to evaluate for yourself, but it definitely is much more in line with what people are looking for. Yeah. Oh, okay. Thank you. Someone said, so there actually is a winged lion in Chinese mythology. Someone's mentioning on the side called the Pixiu. No, the X would be Chi. So Pichu. Pikachu. That's probably not right. I can't imagine that's for inspiration. But yeah, I've seen winged lions in Chinese mythology previously, so it's really cool to see those there as well. A lot of really definitely pulling from some larger lore here. Okay, and that's that. Do you think Cathay needs more frontline infantry? I think they've got everything else. It's sort of like, does Bretonnia need more frontline infantry? Well, yes. But them being weak peasants is sort of part of it. I would love to see a Bretonnia DLC that adds, foot knights and a couple other things with the brigands and stuff, which Old World just brought in. I was so excited to see that. And I think that Cathay sort of suffers from the same thing, like it has Celestial Generals, but the not Celestial Generals, the Celestial Dragon Guard guys, but they're sort of like a hybrid with a sword and a shooty, and there's a lot more hybrid units in Warhammer 3 for some reason. They don't seem to want just like dedicated one role. So I think that's a design choice. I'm not sure we're going to see that. I would expect to see a heavy cavalry of some kind. Honestly, if it's Monkey King, we're going to see a lot of monkey-based infantry. It sounds dumb to say that, but like, a Gigantopithecus frontline monstrous infantry sort of does the same thing. And it's a bit more interesting. It's a bit more cosmopolitan, a little more variety, instead of just another frontline infantry unit, which I think is what they're sort of going for here. But we'll see. Oh yes, monks. Oh goodness, I think monks is definitely one of those things that a lot of people are looking forward to with Monkey King. Those glass cannons, healing, boosting. Not high armor, but high health, high punch. They all sort of do the same thing without just being bog standard defensive line infantry. Oh gosh, I forgot about monks. Thank you for reminding me. Those guys are so cool. I hope, and the thing is, I hope this lands well enough that people get excited about what's coming up next. Because it's fun to be excited. It's fun to talk about. Hey, I'd like to see blank. All right. King Kong monstrous units. Yes. Giant, like, orange guys wading through. All right. Cool. Well, that is everything. I was glad to go over this with you guys. I did a little bit of a different format today because this came in real hot, and I'll admit to you that I only have about 2 hours every morning to work on it, and my time limit was pretty much up, so I had to make sure to get this done. But this has been Total War News. I don't make the news, I just read it. And thank you all for watching today.